Today, see a comprehensive demo of Tanium's enhanced digital employee experience. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlow. Recently, Tanium has gotten the attention of industry analysts with our DEX offering. That's Digital Employee Experience. And many of you have watched those related episodes here on the channel when we covered modules like Performance and Engage, and Investigate, and ScreenMeet. And I want to show you how all those different modules create a true end-to-end experience that can make life easier, both for us as Tanium administrators and also for our end users. So our guest is here for the first time on the show. Ryan, please introduce yourself for our audience.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Dune. I'm a senior director here at Tanium on the technical solutions engineering side, and I've been with Tanium for about 6.5 years now.
Man, that's great. You must have started right after I did. Yeah, good times. And I'd like you to start, Ryan. If you could just, I know some of our people probably aren't familiar with the term DEX. Could you define that for us?
Yeah, so basically DEX stands for, Digital Employee Experience. And, for many different organizations, that could technically mean different things. But for us, this is to give, customers the ability to have, just that real-time visibility to what's going on the endpoint. Basically, whether it's performance metrics, or, you're looking at system logs, or essentially, Tanium gives you real-time visibility to all of the telemetry on the endpoint, but also the ability to understand the end user sentiment as well, too. So it's not just about the endpoint, but it's also about the end user, and Tanium gives you that end-to-end capability to measure not just performance, but also how the user is doing as well, too.
Yeah, I like to call that last mile visibility. It's like we can read the mind of a user. There's no PowerShell script that'll tell you what the user's thinking, right? But now we can ask, and so that's just amazing with this capability. So, specifically for Tanium, how do our capabilities map into this space?
A good quote that I think I'm always going to use that one of our customers mentioned to me is this concept of users suffering in silence, right? Basically, they're having a lot of issues. They're very frustrated. Nobody really knows about it. That's where Tanium changes everything, where in real time, you can understand how your users are feeling about their overall experience. So basically, where Tanium is going to be different than anything else on the market is everything we do at Tanium. It sits on top of our core platform, which is all about real-time visibility. For some individuals or some organizations, that tends to be what I call marketing terminology. For us, real-time visibility is the ability to see what's going on literally in a matter of seconds across thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of endpoints. Many performance solutions on the market, either A, they're not deployed very widely across the environment just due to things like cost and also infrastructure requirements. But also the thing too is when you start deploying larger performance solutions, that exist within the market, that in itself can cause performance problems in your environment. So from a Tanium perspective, we have a lightweight agent that allows you to see all of the performance telemetry on the endpoints, the ability to gauge, how the user is feeling, the end user sentiment, giving the user the ability to do what's called remediation actions, giving them the power to actually take action based on what's happening on their endpoint. But Tanium can do this all in real time without affecting performance of the endpoint, without saturating the bandwidth within your internal networks. But you'll see this all within the demo, but Tanium just gives you that real-time visibility platform that allows you to effectively see performance, again, without affecting performance of the environment.
Well, I'm eager to see the console. I know you've got something special stored for us today, so let's dive right into that demo.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to show you how Tanium's Investigate, Performance, Engage, and ScreenMeet capabilities work together to improve both mean time to resolution and end user productivity. We'll use a common scenario where a user has opened a ticket with the complaint that their video conferencing application keeps crashing. If you have already integrated Tanium with ServiceNow, then this investigation could begin by clicking within the ServiceNow ticket. For the purposes of the demonstration, I'll begin within the performance module to give you a quick overview of the kind of data that Tanium monitors. So let's head over to performance. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at is what is known as the performance workbench. So, first off, if you look at things like triggered monitor alerts, basically these alert monitors demonstrates that you can set thresholds for certain kind of events that you want to be notified of underneath specific conditions. Then we have like things like the event rule type. This is where we can show you that performance captures endpoint telemetry, including things like disk capacity, memory, process network latency, application crashes, system crashes, and CPU. And then what you can also see too is that performance gathers a lot of granular information as well too. So if you see here, we can gather information on things like, applications with the most amount of crashes, or maybe you want to see things like applications with the highest CPU usage, or applications with the highest memory usage. Now, if I scroll back up, an important metric that we want to look at too is this overall performance score. So what is the performance score? Basically, what we'll see is that performance gathers all of this endpoint data and averages it to create a summary of the endpoint score that we can track over time. So now that we understand where Tanium is getting this data from, let's continue with our scenario and look into that video conferencing app crash issue that our user reported. I have an endpoint that I want to look at, and basically what I'll do is I'm just going to scroll up to the top here. So this is the endpoint that has been affected by this video conferencing app crash issue. So what we're going to do is I am going to open up what's called the investigation tab or the investigate tab, and I'm going to directly connect to this endpoint. I'd like to point out that if you had ServiceNow, this is basically where you would land directly if you were leveraging the ServiceNow integration with Tanium. We know that the ticket that was about the video conferencing app crash issue, the user has been reporting that it's been happening for a while, but, they felt the most amount of frustrations with it within the past 24 hours. So what I'm doing now is just setting the scope to the past 24 hours. And then if I scroll down, what we'll do is, right now we're not seeing any specific types of events. But basically, what I want to do is I want to filter on performance events. So if you see here, we've had 46 events happen over the past 24 hours. So what's interesting is not only are we seeing that we have application crashes, you can also see here that we're also having issues with CPU utilization as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select all of these events and I want to add them to an investigation. Because basically, it's not just about the application crashing, but it's also the other periphery things that I'm seeing here as well, too. Things like CPU-related issues or even memory-related issues as well, too. So if I click Add to Investigation, and I'm going to click New Investigation, you're going to see a few different fields that we're going to fill out. So for example, let's call this Performance Investigation. We can put in any kind of description. I can choose whatever content set that I want to put it into. So for example, I'm going to, leave it within the investigate content set. In terms of who the assignee is, I will actually set that to myself. And then also I can set the priority as well. So for now, I'll just set the priority to medium. What's also important to know is that you could include a link to the ServiceNow incident as well. For now, I'm just going to keep it the way it is, and I'm going to click on Add.
So what does that do when you link it to a ServiceNow incident?
We have a lot of integrations between Tanium and ServiceNow. But basically what that means is you have that sort of like reciprocal relationship where not only can you easily pivot from ServiceNow into Tanium, but then that also means that you can pivot from Tanium into ServiceNow as well too. So it allows for teams working on this sort of performance issue to easily collaborate with one another between those two different platforms.
Very nice. And with all these different types of, like app crashes and OS crashes and network latency, all this stuff coming together, creates as that all those things that we saw, are those the little stripes on the bar down here?
Yeah. So basically what happens is, this is where you can see all of the different kind of events happening across the endpoint. Something I will say, and it is very important to know, many times when you're doing a performance investigation, one of the biggest things that organizations lack is historical information. And when we built out basically our solution for monitoring performance on the endpoint, we made it so that every endpoint in the environment by default has 14 days worth of historical information. So to your question, yes, you're able to see all of the events that are occurring, but not just from the past 24 hours. You can actually go and see what's been happening over the past 14 days or even more if you want as well too.
Well, so the user calls in and maybe our ticket queue's backed up and it takes us a couple days. That's fine. We'll get to them and we'll still have all the data. Nice.
Exactly, exactly. So, and then, a good situation too is like, even if the user is disconnected and they have no internet and they're still facing problems or issues, we will record all of those performance events. And the moment that they actually have internet connectivity, we can go back and see what was happening, even during the time that they weren't connected to the internet. So what I've done now is this is that investigation that I've created. So if you see here, I can add some comments in the investigation. I can close the investigation. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down and see all the various activities. So as I said, right now, yes, we do see application crashes, but we also see other issues around like memory utilization being high, CPU utilization being high as well too. So for example, let's just say I were to click on just one of these events. What you'll see here is you'll get details about the events. And then if I want, I can also add in a comment. So for example, let's just say, noticed a specific issue on the endpoint. So what happens now is teams can work together as they're looking at this issue. They can add in comments and view each other's comments as well too. So for example, let's just say I go over to the comment section. You can easily pivot between looking at the activities and also looking at the comments. So what's nice about this is that ability to collaborate amongst your team, have that sort of like that tracking of the issue, what's going on over time. But that cross-team collaboration is also a thing that a lot of our customers really love about our product as well too.
And yeah, that's super helpful because it's not like back in the cube days now with most people working from home. You're not prairie dogging over the top of the cube to talk to your coworker. Now you can
Exactly.
drop the notes here and they can see it all in context where it matters.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and to your point, it's kind of like, as because the thing too is if you think about it, like you may have multiple members of the team, looking at this issue throughout the course of a day. And maybe you have a stand-up meeting at the end of the day to discuss what's going on because it's a high priority issue. Well, the good thing is now each team member can see the comments that are being put in live. So they could be like, oh, you know what? I've seen all the stuff and all the other things that you pointed out. And you know what? I agree with that. So now it just allows you to see all the data streaming in live and not having to wait, a couple of hours before you talk to your teammate the next time. Basically, I also want to point out too that, if we had linked a ServiceNow incident earlier, then this comment would be published to the ServiceNow ticket as well too. So at this point, what we're going to do is, let's assume the help desk team member has done some research and determined that the version of the app that the user has, it has known issues. Okay. So now what we can do is we could easily pivot into one of our other modules known as Engage and see how easy it is to offer the end user self-remediation. This approach gives control back to end users and takes a lot of weight off of the help desk. So let's pivot into Engage, which is where I am now. So as we look at the workbench for Engage, what we'll see is a few different areas. So for example, if you see here, overall digital employee experience metrics. So what I want to point out is that we are able to see the performance score again. But this time, we also see the employee sentiment score. The sentiment score is based on responses to surveys that we've sent out. It lets us know how users feel about their digital experience. This is useful because it helps IT gauge how well they are meeting service level expectations, both objectively and subjectively. So, for example, if we look at things like, say, the sentiment score, we can basically look at, overall sentiment score over time. What we can also do too is we can look at, say, specific computer groups. So, for example, right now, I'm looking at all computers against the environment, but maybe I want to look at a specific part of the organization. Maybe I want to look at, say, marketing or accounting or engineering, or maybe I just want to look at, a specific flavor of Windows or, and so on. And the nice thing too is, again, you can see over time what that score is like. So, for example, are we trending down? Are we trending up? Let's just use a common scenario. Um, it's coming up for refreshes for a lot of the laptops in the environment, for example. It'd be interesting to know if the overall end user experience has been trending down for a while, or for some reason it's trending up. Or let's say you do that laptop refresh, and then over the next few months, what is the overall end user sentiment? Is it trending up or if it's trending down? So let's just say this. You give your organization a bunch of new laptops, the best hardware that exists in the market, but end user sentiment is going down. That tells you that it's not a hardware issue, that now they're facing basically software related issues. So is it something to do with Windows? Is it something to do with the applications that they're using? And we can use this engage module to figure that out essentially.
Yeah, and an example that my customer wants to set up is they want to survey end users who received a new device to say, hey, was everything there? We just migrated your device. Did we miss any apps or anything that you're missing in the config? So again, this is a great way to interact with the users.
Exactly, exactly. So what we want to do now is let's get back to taking care of this end user with the issues with their video conferencing app. So what we'll want to create is a notification letting the end user know that we can upgrade their application. Because as I mentioned before, we've identified that it has to deal with older version, for example, that they're running on their endpoint right now. Basically, what we'll do is we can let the end user know that we can upgrade their application, and hopefully this can alleviate the issues that they're experiencing. So what I'll do now is I'll head over to the surveys tab. Now, on the top right here, what you'll see is a button to create a survey. And below, you can see several kinds of surveys and notification templates. These can include all kinds of self-remediation, ranging from things like freeing up disk space to removing an application. What I'll do is I'll actually show you an example of a related survey that's already prepared by editing an existing one. So for example, what I'll do is we have this video conferencing app survey. These are very easy to set up. But what I do want to do is to show you sort of like three main areas. So for example, first thing to note is that we could localize the language to the end user's locale. Current languages include English, Spanish, French, Dutch, Japanese, and Korean. Now, what I also want you to note is that we can also specify a wide range of trigger conditions. So for example, these conditions that we're looking at, for example, issues that might be causing, that we're looking at issues that could be related to the video conferencing app. So basically what that means is based off of something happening, you could then send a survey. So it's like, okay, if you see this application crash, send the survey. If you see CPU utilization at this percentage, send this survey. So what's nice is you can actually group together conditions where it's like, okay, if a crash happens, and CPU utilization is high and memory utilization is high, send the survey as well too. So it's really nice because basically that means that you can tailor these surveys for an infinite amount of scenarios that could be happening across the entire organization. And then the last thing to note is that we can customize the questions and attach remediation steps. So for example, I chose this because I wanted to show you how the survey could look if we had been doing this automatically without waiting for a user to generate a ticket. The user would have an option to do nothing. They could upgrade the app or create a ticket.
I was just going to say, I really like this because in so many IT shops, and especially in the support desk, when a user calls and they mention that app, we know usually what it is because we've seen this before. And it's so nice to be able to automate this for service desk to have automatically, we can, they don't even, I guess what I'm getting to here is they don't have to call the service desk. We'll be able to
Exactly.
detect that the app is malfunctioning, and we know the remediation script or steps. So we just drop that into a Tanium package with a PowerShell script or something, and just go ahead and fix it for them and give them that ability to fix it themselves.
Exactly. And I'll actually give you a real life scenario is like, let's just say there's a known issue that's currently hot within the environment, and your help desk is right in the trenches solving that issue across all of the endpoints. You can use Engage to send a survey out or a notification out to all the users to say, listen, like we are currently working on this issue. This is a known issue. Here's a link, go to this KB article, for example, where we're tracking all the information. We will give you sort of the genesis of what's going on. But basically, kind of to what you mentioned is many times you run into these situations where help desk is just being flooded and overwhelmed. But now when you can send this information to the users, they feel empowered because now they know what's going on. They know what they're feeling is being seen. So now the help desk can focus on remediation as opposed to just sort of like answering the phone, if we want to put it that way. Continuing on, for this demo, we will presume that I had sent a similar survey without the option to create a ticket, since that's already been done. Something that I did mention here, as I was talking previously, is around this concept of remediations. The kinds of remediations that you can attach to a survey are, again, pretty much infinite, but these are a lot of the out of the box ones. So, for example, you'll see things like, restarting an endpoint, clearing the cache, restarting an app, cleaning up disk. These are common tasks that are easy for an end user to just click on and execute. So when you send a survey, you can send any of these remediations, the user clicks it, and then that remediation will occur on the endpoint. This gives the user control over whether or not they want to take the action and when they want to take the action. It's less intrusive than forcing something upon them.
And I think it's cool to point out here that you've got a toggle switch for Windows and Mac. This is
Yes.
not just Windows machines. And also, we're not leaving the Mac people in the dark. I like that.
Yep, exactly. I mean, I will say, being an ex-Microsoft person, I have a high preference towards Windows, but it's very important to, look after both our Mac folks and Windows folks as well, too. So, yeah, definitely. So what we want to do is, let's presume, a scenario where we sent that notification and the user took action to upgrade the video conferencing app. So again, like, we see that they have an older version. We send them the survey and say, hey, you know what? You have an older version. This has known issues. Would you like to upgrade the application? And then they click yes. But the IT admin is, when we look back at the ticket, we see that they are still having application crash issues. So we look into performance and we can't see any other data indicating an issue. So what we may want to do is we may want to actually see what they're seeing, right? Where it's like, okay, we've upgraded the application. The user is still reporting an issue, but we can't see anything. There's no log saying that there's an issue. There's no telemetry from performance saying there's an issue. But the user is still saying something like, oh, you know what? When I open up the application, it freezes and all this kind of stuff. So this is a situation where we may want to actually see what's going on the endpoint itself. And that's where we can do ScreenMeet to actually do a screen sharing session with the user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that same endpoint that we looked at before, which is this perfwin 413. It's also important to know that if you're using ServiceNow and Tanium together, you could initiate this ScreenMeet or screen sharing session from either one. And I'm going to open up the screen sharing session. So something that's important here to know is everything that we're doing is from a single pane of glass. Generally organizations that are trying to do a deeper performance investigation they are jumping between different tools to get the information that they need. Now, even with this screen sharing, right? Generally, you would either do one of two things. You would use a separate application to do remote control screen sharing, or you would have to RDP to the endpoint. So the nice thing with our solution is that you can now even disable RDP on the endpoint. So Ashley, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, if I'm going to disable RDP, that means I'm probably closing a often attacked security vector.
Exactly. So it's interesting where again, I'll just give a personal story where I was on a call with a bunch of members of a customer that we have, and one of the happiest people on the phone was actually somebody from the network security side. They're like, hey, listen, you know what? I love the fact that we can now disable RDP on the endpoint because now we have ScreenMeet. And it was just interesting because usually the happiest people on the phone are the help desk folks. And sure, they're elated to have the product, but the network security team was just super excited that we could close that security gap within their organization. So, back to the scenario that I was talking about before is you can have situations where performance, like there's no hard data to show that a user is having an issue. It's the fact that they're saying, hey, listen, when I open up this application, it freezes and then it errors out. Well, the nice thing now is with ScreenMeet, I have full control over the endpoint and I have full visibility to what the user is seeing as well. And it's also important to mention that this all scales really well. So once we identify an issue, we can also integrate further auto remediation into Engage. So again, we're using this tool or we're using all of these different tooling to take a lot of weight off of IT. Okay.
So, in other words, you set up maybe an automatic remediation for 80% of the cases, and then you've got the other few that it's not working. You do your screen share, identify the root cause, and then you could incorporate that into your remediation options for
Exactly.
a higher success rate.
Exactly, exactly. So, in this situation, again, we could just sit there and say something like, okay, you know what? We've witnessed what the user was seeing. The application is freezing, even though we're using the latest version of it. And honestly, I will tell you, again, a real story. This happened with another product where the end user was using the latest version, but they were still having like application hangs. We recorded our actual session with the user. And then what we ended up doing was we sent that recorded session, it had no private data, to the application vendor and said, hey, listen, we're using the latest version of your application, but it's still freezing. And we had it recorded to show them. And it turned out that there was a bug in their latest version that they weren't aware of. They fixed that bug and actually um, released a newer version of the application. So this was definitely a very handy thing to have in that situation, and obviously just a very handy thing to have overall. Once we've resolved the user issue, what we can do is we can now, close out the investigation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to Engage, and I'll take a look over at surveys, and we have a survey already called the IT experience. So basically what we're seeing here is we already have a template ready, and we'll basically see like where we want to we can choose who we want to target it to. So for example, we're looking at the work from home employee sentiment, and if you see here, we can see things like how we actually want to rate the experience. Is it very good, good, okay, poor, very poor? Basically this is sort of like what's known as that 5-point scale, asking the employee, how do we think we did? Ranging from very poor to very good. I could easily edit the question, changing the name from work from home employee sentiment to IT service sentiment or anything else like that. But what's important to know is everything that you're seeing today is highly customizable to whatever makes sense within your environment. Basically, coming up to the end here in conclusion, we received the ticket from an end user. We used investigate and performance data to get a better understanding of the problem. We sent a self-service self-remediation notification. We helped them with a live secure ScreenMeet session and ended with a sentiment survey so IT can measure how satisfied the employee is. Back to your original question is, what is the differentiator with Tanium? I mean, the biggest differentiator is, all of this is happening with real-time visibility, meaning within a matter of seconds, we can see what's happening on the endpoint. We can, remove an application, upgrade to the latest version, measure end user sentiment. We can interact with the user live, and we can do all of these things without ever affecting performance of the endpoint, without saturating bandwidth within the network. I and a lot of our customers love this because it's just that sort of end-to-end solution for that digital employee experience.
Well, Ryan, this is a fantastic demo. I'm just thinking, everything from seeing the smiley face to the frowny face reminds me, when I go to the, walking out of the bathroom at the airport and they have the little thing, you hit the button. That was
Yeah,
your
yeah,
experience today. So if you're sending something to your end users, ring the bell if you enjoyed your food tonight, kind of thing. So that's great to be able to have for IT to have that kind of experience. I'm curious, what are the frequently asked questions as you're talking to people about this that you run into?
Actually, that's a great question. So, one of the biggest questions that I always get is, what's the performance impact that performance has, right? And actually, generally, what happens in any environment is when you have a performance issue, and you open up a ticket to help desk, and help desk goes to take a look, and they look through some of the logs and all that kind of stuff. Generally, 99.9% of environments, you do not have enhanced logging turned on, because generally when you're doing enhanced logging within any endpoint, that in itself will cause a performance issue. When a performance issue happens, help desk comes in to investigate. They will turn on enhanced logging for maybe 24 hours, 48 hours to see if the issue happens again. But that in itself causes a performance issue. So the biggest question I generally get is, what performance problems will this solution cause to my endpoint? And the answer is none, because Tanium by design is a very lightweight agent. We designed all of our solutions with the capabilities, with these advanced capabilities, but also doing it in a way that never affects performance of the endpoint. So to be honest, that's been one of the biggest wins, because I tell a lot of customers, I'm like, listen, with performance, like our own performance solution, you can see the performance of Tanium. That just means that we have nothing to hide. So, that's sort of a long answer to your question, but the question that I get most often is, what problems could they, face within their environment when they deploy a solution like this, because they're just so used to being burned every time by every other thing that they've ever sort of deployed in their organization. And the great thing about Tanium is it's such a lightweight agent, and it does not cause any performance issues within your environment.
I just think when you and I were doing Microsoft support, and number one, somebody has an issue. So then you're trying to collect all, after the fact, you're trying to collect all the logs and put all the pieces together. But here, it's got a stream of this data, so we can just go back to the point in time and we can grab all the event logs, all the text logs, whatever, all that data, and this really, I think, leads to closing tickets faster, because we don't have to set the trap for the performance thing and wait for it to happen again. We've already
Yes.
got the data, so we can really. I know we've talked about this on the show before, but it's really clicking for me, because I see, we don't have to set the trap, wait for the thing to happen again. And we're talking days of time sometimes for users before they get their problem solved. And now we can look at it retrospectively with this lightweight stream of data and be able to be more effective at what we do and faster.
Yeah, it's funny as you say that, is like the history of performance troubleshooting that I've always had is, as you mentioned, we would always have to wait for that bad thing to really happen again. So now we can capture Bigfoot on the first go, right? Everyone says there's a Bigfoot, but for some reason nobody can ever really capture a good video or picture of it. Well, think of Tanium as that ability to capture Bigfoot in real time, the first time.
Man, that's great. Sasquatch is on the run.
Exactly.
Well, Ryan, thank you for this tour of DEX today and really stitching all this together so we can see the workflow involved. And it really goes to show because I know we've had some of these modules on the show before, but as you're demoing this, I'm seeing new features that have even been added since then. Thanks for the tour. And for everybody watching, we've got some resources as always. So in the show notes below, you can get a link to help.tanium.com where we've got docs for each one of these modules and discussion forums where you can interact with other people who are using them as well. We also have a really handy data sheet. It's actually several pages that kind of summarizes what Ryan talked about today and kind of outlines all those scenarios and use cases to give you some ideas of how you can get the most out of these things for you. And if maybe you don't have all these modules, you could talk to your account team, or there's also a link in the description below where you can request a demo, and we'll actually schedule a live call with you to get you a demo personally for your environment where you can ask more questions. So thank you for joining us today on Tanium Tech Talks for this end-to-end experience with Tanium's enhanced employee digital experience. And until next time, go Tanium.